Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about WWDC. I know it's not here yet, but it will be soon enough. And we're going to talk about what we liked about last year, what we want to do this year, and kind of dig into that. So stay tuned for that. And again, if you'd like to get more information about what we do, go to officehours.global. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
Our first one this morning comes from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C., and Greg says, looking for medium... Oh, I'm sorry, that something else came up for me. Andy Kokendorfer's in Viera, Florida. I'm sorry.
Looking for... We had it. Try that again. Somehow we got... Yeah, I think
let's see. Greg Gibson or Andy Kokendorfer?
Andy Kokendorfer. I think that someone got a little ahead of themselves there.
Okay. No, it may be a switching problem here. Anyway, Andy Kokendorfer has this question from Viera, Florida. Looking for medium-priced audiophile headphones. Any favorites you can recommend? And thanks.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, he did say medium price because I was about to. I went back to my archives from CES and I was like, here's the Shangri-La by Hi-Fi Man.
Yeah.
That's one of the great things about CES is getting to listen to these because there's so many nuances. You really got to listen to them, but I can give some recommendations based on what I've owned. Bowers & Wilkins PX9s. One of the things about these, though, is the DAC. If you're listening through a computer or through like an iPhone, which is what I was doing, you need a little dragonfly. So there's these USB devices that look like this. They're just basically USB, and so you need the little camera converter lightning to USB to 3.5 millimeter. So if you're really saying audiophile, you need something like a DAC. So what's your entire chain going from your source, and is it a high quality source? Because even in Spotify, you can bump up the resolution. A lot of people don't know that. For production headphones, I'd be looking more at this industry standard 7506s, the Sennheiser HD25-1-2s. Rode just came out with these, which are the $149, so they're $50 more than the 7506s. These are the NT-H1000s. The big deal about these is they're gel and then Alcantara, and so they're super comfortable. The jury's still out on the sound quality. I mean, they're not musical, so these are not. If you want audiophile to listen to music, that's the thing. And then TJ just asked the same kind of question, and I said, dude, he owns the Bowers & Wilkins, and so I said, if you want what I'm listening to now, I sold my Bowers & Wilkins, and I just got the Apple headphones because these things are wireless, so then you don't have to deal with that dragonfly and the cable connector, and there's a convenience trade-off there, and then you get spatial in these too. So it's fascinating to listen to all these new digitally remastered tracks, and there's more and more of them coming online every day because some of the stuff that they're doing, like George Thorogood, Bad to the Bone, just blew me away with what they did with that. It was almost overkill. Like there's stuff moving around, which is almost distracting, but it was fascinating to listen to it. So I'd try a pair of the Apple ones. They're probably the best recommendation, bang for buck.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the term medium-priced audiophile is an oxymoron because I don't think there is such a thing as a medium-priced audiophile headphones. I like the MDR V6s, which was the predecessor to the 7506s. And like the 7506s, they nicely fold into a compact place, and they have the ends on them which are adaptable. It comes with a little removable adapter, so you can go 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch until you lose that little screw-on adapter, and it works great. We use them primarily in motion picture sound recording, so they're great for dialogue, and a lot of people use them for music too, although they don't have quite as good. The V6s have a little better bass response than the newer ones do, so you might have to find them in the vintage store.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I started out with Clevite headphones, which were essentially electromagnets with a steel plate in them, and moved on to the classic Koss Pro 4 AA's, and then eventually ended up with the 7506s, which you see is very popular. And for me, it's you have to rate them on the basis of how good they sound coming back to you while you're reading copy. I don't know how musical these guys are. They're okay. But for my voice, these are perfect.
Go ahead, John.
Both Tucker Dragoo and I have the same set of headphones. Ultrazone, they're made in Germany. These are the Pro 550s, the Pro 750s. They're medium priced, in between $300 to $500. And the nice thing about these, they fit completely over your ear, so there's no pressure on the ear itself.
Go in, Sky.
Yeah, I can't say much more about the Sony other than you can get additional gel coverings. And the only reason I get the weird colors is so that when I take them onto a set, which I do oftentimes, I'll know which ones are mine. And it also says the word professional right on it. So they must be good.
Yeah, I for the most of my years when and what we've kind of carried around and packed into a lot of stuff with Pixel Core and everything else for the AKG Pro Audio K271s. They're just light and easy, and we just used them for a long time. More recently, I have the Audio Technica, I think M50s are the ones that I use. I have to admit, I don't use them that often. I use as Guy pointed out, I use the Apple the Maxes probably more than anything else if I'm listening to music, just because they're convenient, so that I can walk around and I go out on what I call my sleep boat, which is my hammock, and have a hat over my head, and I put this thing that blocks out the light completely. And I have my headphones on, and I swing in there, and I listen to Appalachian Spring, and that's like just go away for 20 minutes. All right, next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington has our next one, and it's the OH Office Hours 2.0 backend crew is fascinating to watch and listen to. Why are we not seeing more people back there, he wonders.
We should, I will say it's just an incredible opportunity to learn a lot about production. Like if you're trying to do this, I mean, it's open to everyone right now. As we get bigger with distribution, it'll get harder to get into it. So I would highly recommend, dipping your toe, your foot, your knee into that process. It's an amazing thing what people are doing in the back end there. And so I think that if you're thinking about, I'm interested in production, and you don't learn production by doing it once. You learn production by doing it 50 times or 100 times, and you learn what that process is and what those challenges are. And I think that we're growing this into a new show. I think that eventually this could be a service that people could provide, to other people, to do this, and we're figuring out what that would look like and how that would work. So I would highly recommend checking it out. It's a good question. It's a good question, Guy. Go ahead, Guy. He pulls
I just want to say how to get in there is in the Discord. It's the Office Hours 2.0 area, and I think there's a Google Doc in there that you sign up to get it into the back end so that you can actually see what's going on. But watching it, it's just fascinating because there's the whole interface that's, I believe, on Universe.
The Universe
interface.
interface.
Is it VPN? It's VPN from where? Like the UK?
It's not VPN. That's the best part. So that's why we use Universe, is that Universe allows us to have an interface, the web interface, that just talks back to, that's able to transport back. And so, I mean, it's installed on our machine, but what you open to control it is just a web page. And so it's gotten out of the whole VPN requirement. So Universe acts as the interface, and if then it talks to Isadora, and we've kept all the kind of the thinking inside of Isadora, and the guys keep on pushing Isadora pretty hard. But it's I think that it's really, I mean, I get a lot of comments about it, about how it looks, and it's quite a show, and we're putting it together, and a lot of help from a lot of people. And so I would highly recommend it. I see some point in the future where we're doing this 24/7 about different subjects. There might be 2 hours on audio, 2 hours on video, 2 hours on other things like that, but we would need more people to know how to use the system to make that happen. So, and again, it's a great opportunity to meet other people. The best networking is working with other people. Like volunteering with other people is the best way to get to know other folks, because you don't really know them when you're talking. When you're just talking to them. Like to me, someone could talk a good game, but do they show up? Do they, how do they handle pressure? How do they handle things that need to be done? That's how you get to know people. And that's how I get to know everybody. So anyway, I would highly recommend it. And again, Guy, where can people go to do that? It's
in the Discord. Dennis just posted to let everybody know it's in the Office Hours 2.0 section. And so if you go in there, there's a Google Doc to sign up, and then you get the link to go into it's a webinar. So as a webinar, I believe you have to get promoted to a co-host, and then you could do a multi-pin, because they have the multi-viewer and then they have that Universe interface. So if you want to watch kind of what's going on two screens, you want that ability you just ask JJ to make you a co-host, and then you pop in and you can better see what's really going on. Like I put it up while I was on my treadmill the other day. I put it up on my 60 or 70-inch TV in the living room is really awesome to watch on a multi-view and see all this stuff happening in real time and listening. It's just a different world, you know, being a panelist or being a participant or producer. It's just a different world to go in there and see how how the sausage is made, so to speak. And here, just, you know, the professionalism. Everybody's getting better all the time. Andre Dole here, just they're getting pro on comms. So it's just reinforcing all the things that we're learning. So it's fascinating for those of you that are watching. Go in there. You'll learn something. I'm serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Nathan Cashin is up next from Oregon City, Oregon. He says, I use a Panasonic LUMIX G85 as my webcam, and I often forget to turn it off overnight or when otherwise not in use. Are these micro Four Thirds cameras susceptible to burnout or other damage when left on for extended periods?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I have the brother to that one. Where did I put it? Oh, right here. The G100, and this is what I used at office hours for over a year and left it on for a year. It's fine. And then I use a Z-Cam that's also an E2 that's also a micro Four Thirds, and it's been on for a year. And we have other cameras in the studio that have been left on for years that are micro Four Thirds. So they've been fine.
My 6K has been left on for at least, well, maybe not left on 100% for a year. It's gotten a rest for a couple hours or something like that every once in a while, but for at least a year. And but the screen is dying. so I will say that there's big lines through it, so I'm gonna have to take a look at it. But so I will say with the 6Ks and the 4Ks, I would be a little bit careful. It looks like that LCD won't last forever if you leave it on all the time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, a lot of the LCDs turn off automatically after a period of time, if you're using them as a webcam especially. Yeah, it won't hurt it. All the CMOS sensors are used in all closed-circuit security cameras, which point at the same thing 24/7. Plus, you're talking about leaving it on overnight. At night, it's pretty dark. The only thing really you have to worry about damaging the sensor is if sun is directly shining into the lens for a long period of time. That could cause a little damage to the sensor, but these days they're pretty robust. So,
I remember that was always when I was a kid. We were using video cameras. That was the big thing. Do not point it into the sun. Do not point it into the sun.
Tubes were not good to point it into the sun.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no more so than any other kind of repurposed, not quite a video camera. You go on YouTube, be sure you turn off the LCD, and you'll be fine.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington up next. He says, Matt in the Kitchen, MITK, has a use case for meta characters. We're looking at Loomai, and he's got a link there. Any tips?
Grant?
Well, I guess, Sky, it's one of those things where we've said so much about this stuff that we really kind of hate this whole virtual thing. You'd have to have a really good reason for it. And the shame about that particular context is that the show is already so compelling. It doesn't need gimmicks. It doesn't need, these other bits of this weird technology, which is a gimmick. I really don't see, like Predo said it the other day, it's just Second Life all over again, and 20 years ago. And it's better, they're doing it better technically, but it's still not a good experience from a human interaction point of view. And then you add food, you've already got this amazing, anyway, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, that you're not all that excited about it. But I think it's one of those times where it's hard to bite your tongue a little bit when a client comes to you and says, I really want to do this new and exciting and amazing thing, and trying to just feed back that maybe it's not so much. And when we think about what is what the key thing is that we're doing, we are connecting people with each other around a common interest in food and the preparation of such. That's compelling. I don't think you need gimmicks and toys and things. But anyway, that's not your question. I just couldn't help myself.
What's the use case, Sky?
Well, Madeline's going through radiation and chemotherapy.
Oh, right.
And so her
now I feel bad.
I know. I saw, you were setting me up, and I thought, oh, I got to be very succinct because I love Grant, and the last thing I want to do is embarrass him. But we do have a use case, and your affirmation, is very meaningful, and thank you for that. The challenge though is, she's going through 6 months of things are changing quickly when you
Okay.
That
is
so.
and
Anyway,
that is
so to
her-
make it entertaining and interesting is our challenge, and so we're experimenting with things that could be available to us. And I look so much better with very skinny. I don't have the. So yes, we've been experimenting. It's not perfect, but this is looking at my camera going through that filter with the mat in the kitchen backdrop. I'll need to reposition the still, but this is an idea that we're playing with. But thank you, Graham.
Well,
can I just say, sorry, Alex, if I could just say, I really think that obviously I'm compassionate to that.
Absolutely.
But there is something about the humanity with connecting with people. I'm not suggesting that you're now going to put her in HD, and I completely understand that. But there is something that it's even further removed by doing this. It puts a mask on the whole thing, and I think there's an opportunity for people to journey through this process with her. And that doesn't mean, as I said, it doesn't mean extreme close-ups. I get that. But I think there's a way of doing this and navigating it in a sensitive way without trying to cover it with a cartoon.
That's fair. That's why I asked, because she is a fighter, and she does want to take people on this journey and look at it with a positive perspective. And this is a challenge. So thank you for that insight.
I worked with a woman who was, while she was getting in treatment, she just had the craziest number of wigs, and they were just so much fun. Like, it was like, and when she got through it all, she just kept wearing the wigs. She never went back. She was like, it was too much fun to have the wigs. She got so attached to them that she just wore this. She had this goofy, these big. She'd have these 50s pink. It was like a 50s haircut, but like pink, and then there'd be ones that were blue, and and that was the way she managed that, and it totally worked. Totally worked, just to take it to another level. Now go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with most everything Grant said. That, and I don't know how you would handle the virtual food. Do you have virtual representations of the dishes she's preparing? I don't understand how that's going to work. And as far as your avatar goes, I think it looks like there was a herd of termites crawling around on your face instead of a beard because of the moray issues, at least on my computer. So I think I agree. I think I'd put the money into a good hairstylist and wig person. We had that problem on Dexter for a whole season because Michael C. Hall underwent chemotherapy and had to wear a wig for an entire season, and not too many people knew that wasn't his real hair, and better makeup and so on.
When did you work on Dexter?
From season 2 to season 8. So
oh my gosh!
Through
so So Courtney and I'm certain
I was there. I think when you were there up in the production office, I was watching Mac Break Weekly when you were up in the production office.
I'm sorry. Was like I suddenly I was like, I know I've seen Courtney before, and I couldn't figure out where. But we walked behind your audio desk in the police office. You were parked on that side, right. And I've been trying to put that together for a long time, and I suddenly realized when you said that, I was like, I know where I've seen you before. So anyway, that is hilarious.
There when Leo came by too.
Yeah. Sorry, put something together there. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree 100% with everything that's been said here. This might be a circumstance, though, where opening interstitials that might allow Madeline to do that as a voiceover and not have to spend quite as much time doing things like the opens and the closes for the show, where you find a way to make it comfortable for her to participate live as she goes through this. But that's just a thought.
As an alt caricature or character.
Opens of shows. I'm thinking of Bewitched has been doing that forever, right? With you had the cartoon opening, but then the live show in the middle, and then a close, and it just keeps her from having one more thing on her schedule that she has to do for every single episode. So that's a thought.
And yes, the wigs are happening, and she's got a very hot pink one that she's very excited about.
Excellent. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, a MacRumors thread mentioned that the iPod Touch has seen use in business settings as a game show style clicker and to provide instructor feedback during and or after a class. Could this be an untapped market opportunity for Mukana?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it wasn't enough of an untapped market opportunity for Apple to keep it alive, but that's a separate issue entirely. It seems like way overkill for Mukana.
We've actually done a lot of audience interaction with Mukana, or there's another app called Commenda that manages comments from Facebook and YouTube. And I've told this story before, but we actually let people vote online to light up a flamethrower. They were so excited about it. Yeah, we got about 100 and I think it was 150,000 interactions a minute for people who wanting that flamethrower to turn on. That was just using Facebook's, they had a type fire actually into the comments to get managed to go ahead, Grant.
As the original person that signed up first for office hours, this is one of Alex's greatest hits, and I just love hearing.
I've shortened it. Have you noticed I've shortened the story just down to the nub?
Same here. It never gets
and
old. I love it.
Sometimes I want the extended version, and feel free to reprise it as well later in the show.
I don't do it in records anymore. I only do it in after hours. All right, next question.
Nathan Cashin in Oregon City, Oregon. Up next, he says homes and offices in many humid regions, for example, India, Brazil, parts of Africa, in my experience, have challenging acoustics due to a lack of carpeting and other sound dampening materials. How do you mitigate this when working with guests or on site?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I can see carpets being subject to mildew and dampness, but most modern soundproofing materials are foam-based materials that are flame retardant and also have mold and pollen and whatever else mitigation built into them. So I don't think you can have a problem going to an alternate.
Courtney?
Yeah, there are lots of textured concrete out there even. So just putting in some type of texturing on the walls is probably going to be immune to the humidity. And the other thing is, the closer you get the microphone to the mouth, the more you minimize the direct versus reflected sound. So if they're wearing a boom headset microphone, that would give you probably the cleanest output with the least amount of echo in a live situation. If you can't figure out some way to break up flat surfaces in the room.
You go, Sky.
Believe it or not, my father-in-law apparently worked with the music group Heart, and they had a studio here in Seattle that had egg cartons on the wall.
My first studio, I had egg cartons. I went to but the biggest problem was that I went just to a restaurant and grabbed the extras, and there's just enough broken ones that it got pretty smelly after a while. So I had to, I would go for the new ones as opposed to the used ones, or be very careful and picky about them as you pull them out. I've done a fair bit of recording in Africa, and I think that one of the things is what we do is for actual work, we get a studio and we get air conditioning and we make it soft and just keep it cold and dry. And that's usually where I work. Like when I'm in Rwanda, I usually work in the green screen area because it's 66 degrees or 68 degrees in there, and that's the only place that it is that temperature. And so for houses and other things, you can put a lot. Everyone talked about great things you can put on the walls. Tapestries are really nice. They look nice, and they will. And if they're at like 100% fullness, which means they've got a lot of wrinkles to them and so on and so forth, they'll pull up a lot of the sound. And then you can throw down rugs. So you may not have carpet, but like in my room is very hard. This room that I'm in right now, but I've got stuff around me. So I've got moving blankets, and I've got throw carpets and so on and so forth down to kind of suck up some of that reflection. So there's definitely ways to do that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, when monitoring on headphones, would the Waves NX head tracker, he's got a link there, bring any benefit when monitoring a complex mix using the NX plugins?
Go, Jason.
It depends on what you're monitoring for. If you're not monitoring for spatial audio, and if your end result is not in spatial audio, I think you're just messing around. If not, then just use your aux faders. I mean, really, if you can't hear it, no, I don't think so.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, plus you're limiting yourself to NX plugins because it's not going to work on anything else. So that's kind of a limitation right there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't even understand the concept of a head tracker on headphones, because the whole idea of having headphones and delivering spatial sound into headphones is to give you the ideal position for monitoring a spatial area. And so you don't want it changing when you move your head around, changing your position in the room based on your head movement, because it takes you out of the ideal position. So why would you even want such a thing?
Well, I find it funny when I'm working on spatial on Apple devices, and I turn my head and suddenly think there's something wrong. I'm like, something just happened. I go, oh no, it's just the headphones. And so, but a lot of the simulators are really, the idea is to try to simulate a space so that while you're mixing, you can hear it. The problem you get into is you can't mix spatial for even near field inside of headphones. Normally you can, because the physics of the audio is different. And what I deal with a lot is you can't mix for a theater inside of near field. And when I say near field, I mean the speakers are close to you. So speakers in your studio is a near field mix. And it took me a long time to get my head around this, is that the physics of the audio, what it sucks up, how it hits the propagation through air changes, the physics of it changed completely based on the volume that you're mixing in. And so a lot of these plugins are designed not so much that you're going to listen to them all the time. It's that while you're mixing, you get a simulation of that space. So I can say, I'm in a big space. And what they do there is they sample that space through either impulses or they go through, they run through the entire hertz range. So they just go through all the tones and you hear this woo, and it goes up. And then we do other ones where we do impulses. And that allows the software to start to simulate what audio should sound like in that space. But the simulation is still not the same as being there. And so you still need to, but these get you closer, to that point where you could start a mix, get further along in that mix, but you can't, every movie that you see go out to a major release to a theaters was mixed in a stage the same size as roughly the same size as the theater. And they talk about the size. Like I have a friend has one that he made it 1 foot larger than the largest one in LA. So he could always say it was the biggest one. So it was just a little bit. It's big. 55 feet, I think is length. Next question.
Next one comes from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. And Greg says, yesterday, one of my clients that does a lot of events changed 2 events that were scheduled to be in-person back to fully virtual due to low registration for the in-person. What does this say, if anything, about the rush back to in-person?
Go ahead, Grant.
I think it says that there wasn't enough appeal. And so as much as people continue to say, we can't wait to get back in person, it's the worst opener to virtual events is, oh, sorry, we're all in here again. Sorry, there's such a apologetic process of talking about, oh, here we are on Zoom again. Sorry about that, or whatever it is, live stream. When actually it's an opportunity to reach way more of your audience, and you can still have an opportunity for people to meet together. So I'm excited to hear this, and it's consistent with what we're hearing as well. Hotels that people are going into to run these events are not being ran properly now. The staff are unskilled. They haven't had to work on events. The costs of the room nights are double the price they used to be. And at the end of the day, people just don't want to get on a plane and do all that. They're happy to connect and do it online. And I think we can just get creative about those exclusive events for in-person or watch parties that people do in their cities, and then they can have their social events around that. But they don't need to travel. And so I'm excited, and congratulations. I think it's great for you.
And I will say that, knowing Greg, I think that part of this is a vote that they've done. I'm guessing they've already done virtual events with Greg, and they know that they're going to come out well. I think when they don't know, they go back to what they know, or if they've had bad experiences. I think part of this is a vote for what Greg does that makes a difference, because bad virtual events are still worse. And that's why we have this here, is to try to reduce the number of bad virtual events. I also have to say, I'm buying tickets for my kids to fly to Pennsylvania for the summer, and the flights are brutal. The flight costs are eye-popping. They are 4 times what it was 2 years ago or whatever when we did it, or last year when we did it. I mean, it is insane, and the gas prices and everything else, and that's not going away anytime soon, and so I think that physical events are just getting a 1-2 punch, one being COVID and now being inflation and the cost of things. I don't like, I was planning to go out and do a whole bunch of things over the summer, and I was like, I don't know if I will. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm troubled by the fact that they were so quick to pull back into all virtual, because in the back of my head, and you folks sound like you know the client and the rest of that, it seems like they weren't fully invested in making virtual the best it could possibly be. And I'm not saying that that's not talent. I understand that Greg is really good at what he does and the rest of that, but that the client didn't commit so much to making virtual truly outstanding and incorporating many of the things we talk about here.
But they're going from physical to virtual. So
right, but I'm saying if they had spent that time seriously making virtual the premier delivery mode and hadn't spent so much time thinking about trying to hybridize it, they probably would be even farther along.
I think that the issue really is that people, they're going back to what's safe. They're going back, they think that what everybody wants is to go back. And I think that people are the brutal awakening for people, when we've talked about it since almost day one, is that once people have a relatively good experience for virtual, it's going to be hard. It's just gonna be hard to get the users to come back, because they're like, hey, that worked really well online. Why don't I just do it that way? And the other thing that I've learned is that people have gotten so used to packing their schedules in a different way because they're virtual. They're used to having meetings one after the other. They don't have to drive cross town. They don't have to do these things, all this other stuff to get to a meeting. And they don't have to walk cross campus. They don't have to, and we saw this with Google when I was in Mountain View at times. People are in just two different buildings and they don't walk across they just go into a conference room and pull up the other conference room and pull up the other one, and then they all have a conversation. And so, just getting around. So there's a lot of folks that, that already do all of that. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm just thinking what a unique opportunity this group has to have this conversation. And Greg, I would think you would want to be the keeper of this knowledge, because I'm looking at all of the different talents that are doing this for so many different variety of clients, big, small, little, huge, massive, tiny. And that's the other thing is, we don't often have an agenda that we have to do things live, so that we have a kind of less bias than some other statistics would have. So
I have an agenda to do it live.
You have what?
Oh, you mean in person? You mean in person?
Virtual.
When you say live, real.
Well,
real
I've got friends that have lots of equipment that need to get that equipment sold and in place and installed.
You mean in person? I was saying live. I think people should do it live. I just don't. But yeah.
And how to make a definition of a term? That's another thing we should.
Go ahead, Bill.
I do think one thing pulling against it is that sadly, too many people, even after 2 years of pandemic, extra Zooms and stuff like that, they're getting stuck in corporations in 4-hour WebEx meetings that they have no business happening. And that's giving them too much fatigue for the idea of this, rather than these tight, quick, engaging shows that we advocate for every day.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that I literally have this conversation with somebody almost every day now, is that if radio, I just tell them, this is what I've gotten used to telling them now, is if radio and TV sounded and looked like most people's Zoom meetings, you wouldn't watch it. It's not that it's radio and TV, it's that people spent some effort on this, on the audio and the video and the lighting, and you wouldn't listen to that. And so the thing is that, the reason we can listen to each other here and in after hours and so on and so forth is because the quality is something that doesn't create fatigue. The fatigue is being created by bad signal processing or bad signals. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think even considering that people are experiencing bad virtual events, in this case, they're still not registering for in-person.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a big hurdle for people to get over to go back to in person. And when they do experience some great virtual events, particularly virtual events that are harnessing particular functions and things that cannot be done in person.
Right.
When you really get an idea of what you can do with breakout rooms, for example, how quickly you can manipulate a large group of people into smaller groups, and then come back and feedback, like all of that, you just cannot do in person. Sure, turn to the 4 people sitting around you. Yeah. You can only do that
rather than automatically connect you to 3 other people in the world that happen to be similar to you. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's super powerful. And thinking about those types of functions that you can do in virtual is the game changer. And I think people are starting to really get a sense of that. There's always going to be people that meet in person, and we all love it. You know, the space, the rocket launch was an example of that. You know, lots of you guys got to hug each other. I think that's awesome, and that's going to happen, right? But we continue to meet each day, and the community builds and the connections build because of what we do here. So it's I think it's all pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, and I will say, as these events, I mean, we're in Model T level right now with these events, and there's huge amounts of money being spent, way more than the progress will be much faster than the Model T, but this is like barely, like this is just past the Big Bang. It's like this still, like, just, you know, and when this starts to form and you start having massive events, I mean, we're less than 2 years away from events that are 1 million people. You know, like 1 million people are going to be aggregating, but they break up into little breakouts, and they break up into pairs, and they break up into the, you know, that's all available in the Zoom SDK. You know, not a lot of people are leveraging some of that right now to that level, but we're not that far away. And as we get to that, and as the video and audio quality get to it, there's still going to be physical events, but most of them will be below 300 people. I just really think 300 is the break point for pulling people together.
We've got a client. For later this year, that's talking 500,000.
Yeah.
And I'm pushing for 1 million. There'll be someone that wants to do it.
It's got to be the first
but the
person.
500,000 will be fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's, you know, and that's like, where can you collect 500,000 people for an event physically? You know, that's still just this tiny little scratch of the population of the world. And so, you know, that still is not a successful TV show. Like, a TV show is 5 million, you know, watching. You know, that's the break point. They go under 5 million, they start canceling shows. And so, you know, for major broadcast. So we're still, and that's just like, you know, whatever, Grey's Anatomy. I've never seen a whole episode of Grey's Anatomy, but evidently millions have. So I think that, you know, but it can get to that scale, you know, and be doing that all the time. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, how do you decide where and how to place acoustical absorption materials like this, and he's got a link there, in a studio space without an acoustical consultant?
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, Douglas, I've got 3 words for you. Use your ears. Use your ears. I don't know why you're treating something if not for your own satisfaction. And what's more, call up your friends at DVE Store and they will help you out. And I don't think they're going to charge you. So if it's about the money, then, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You're getting way ahead of yourself.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Jason gives good advice there. Generally, I like to get a sense of the room after it's been built out, and then you can determine how much needs to be absorbed and how much needs to be diffused, because you do need both of those things. But if you just need a quick answer to that question, I usually try to work the perimeter at the head level, because that's where you're going to hear it most.
Good, Courtney.
And remember, a control room is a different acoustical environment than a studio. Because a studio, you want to have some sound absorbers and some sound reflectors, because you don't want to make it completely dead, because you want it to have a little bit of a live space. But a control room, you want to have it probably pretty dead, because you may want to monitor it on multiple speakers to get the environmental sound or the 3D sound. So you don't want to have the reflections in the studio affecting your perception of your 3D mix. So and the general rule of thumb as far as acoustical treatment is break up the flat surfaces. So in that video, they were putting a lot of square tiles in the ceiling, spaced apart a little bit. And that's just breaking up the flat sheetrock of the ceiling with something that's sound absorbent, and putting those big squares even a few inches apart is good, because it breaks up that flat surface into much smaller areas and eliminates a lot of the reflection. So that's just a general rule of thumb. Break up any parallel walls, and if you have glass walls that you have to see through, it's important to maybe put them at an angle so that they're not perpendicular to any other walls. And a lot of studio spaces will have double glass panes, and one of them will be at an angle, or both of them will be at an angle, so they don't cause double reflections, and they don't cause double reflections of audio in either direction. So keep those rules in mind, and then you can design it without an acoustical engineer.
Go ahead, Bill.
All those things, plus one of the things that surprised me as I was growing in audio in my career was that if I went into a room, I started learning how rooms sound, and I paid attention to that. And you can hear reverb and slapback echo and a few things. But even when I knew what was going on, it took me getting to the point where I had a decent audio chain, particularly one that did a clean recording, and then I would bring it into my NLE or something like that, and I would add enhancements to it like compression and limiting and make sure that it was kind of upfront. And I discovered when I was doing that, even things that were small problems early in the recording change would get magnified. I mean, even a room that I thought was quiet, I would realize, oh my gosh, that wasn't quiet because the AC was behind the sound. When I compressed it to the level I was happy with for the radio spot, the AC really jumped up a lot. So as you get more experience, you learn not just how to listen, but how to listen more acutely for things that your processing chain will make worse later. So my advice is to try to record something in the space that you're going to be in and try to put it through your processing chain to see if something like that happens, some little thing that becomes a bigger thing in the processing.
Yeah, I start with the opposite. Depending on how much absorption I have available to me, I'll start with the opposite walls. So if you think of 4 walls pointing, I'll knock out one side with absorption. I usually use Sonics, and then. But a lot of times I'll put anything that doesn't have a window, I put Sonics on. Like I just fill the whole thing out, and then I listen to it, as Jason said, and I listen for usually what happens is it gets muddy. So then I start pulling things, when you pull all of that out, you lose all the highs and you don't lose the proper amount of lows. And then, so then I start adding bass traps, into it to suck some of the bass up as well. And then, for technical ones, we use pink noise, and then we sample it and then we see what's going, we're emitting something and we want to see what is coming back to the thing. And then you can start to tune it from there. Next question.
Greg Gibson, back from Washington, D.C. I need to buy some SDI cable. What do I need to look for? Should I go fully 12G capable?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It depends. It depends on how you're going to be using this cable. Is it going to be run into a permanent installation where you're going to run them through the walls and to racks where it's never going to move? Or is it going to be hooked up to equipment that moves around, like cameras or monitors, things like that? Because the higher resolution the cable, like RG6, the bigger and fatter and stiffer it is, and the more stress it puts on those B and C connectors that you connect it to. So if you're connecting it to something that's going to be moved around, that's problematic. It doesn't coil easily. It's a lot stiffer, the RG6, the 12, especially the 12 gigahertz. You could get away with some of the Belden 6 gigahertz flexible, and they make some that's capable of passing 6 gigahertz for things that move around. That is even pretty small. It's RG59 or even less. And I would say just go with 6 gigahertz. 12 gigahertz probably kind of overkill unless you're planning on doing a lot of 8K stuff, 8K capture or monitoring. If you're just doing 4K or less, I think you could get away with a 6 gigahertz type of cable.
Yeah, we buy a lot of SDI cable. We build all of our own cables, so we don't buy anything that's terminated. We mostly use, so it depends on your lengths. So you can do 12G on a 6G cable up to about 75 feet in our experience. And so it's when it says rated for 12G, it's usually for a certain length. That it does, that's longer than 75 feet because we use it all the time at that length. Over that, it starts to break up a little bit. So the 6G cable is, we use I like to have really thin cables because when you add the number that we add, weight and fitting it all into the rack becomes a big deal. And so anything less than definitely less than 25 feet, we're going to use, typically we buy it from a company called Clark Wire and Cable. They're out of Illinois, and we buy almost everything from them. And it just comes in rolls. We buy it 1,000 feet at a time or 500 feet at a time, and we get the 23 gauge HD SDI 6 hertz, and we get different colors. A lot of times things going into the router, oftentimes are blue, and things going out of the router are red. Or we do the same thing with, or we do that with the switcher. It kind of lets us know what's going on. We also use these are the Neutrik rear twist BNCs that go with that. So that's the CD 7523s. And they're rear twist. And I will tell you, once you start making your own rear twist SDI cables, you just spit on everything else. like you just like look at all these other SDI cables and you're like, that is horrible. Like you just I literally got to a point where I donated all of our SDI cables that didn't have rear twist to a local, like the community college or whatever. I was like, I'm not going to use these anymore, because the problem you get into is when you're on high density. If I have a 40 by 40 router with the rear twists, I can still reach into the middle of it and just pop it out without a trumpeter. And the issue is the trumpeter is like a long piece that has a little grabber on it and a handle. And you go in there and you pull it out that way. And that's the traditional way to do it. Except every single time you do it, unless you go perfectly in and perfectly out, you're pulling down on your connector, and you really don't want to do that. And so it's a huge lever. And the further you have to go in, it's a lever, and it's really damaging to your equipment, in my opinion. I know a lot of people use them all the day, and they'll argue with me about it. But especially when you're using Blackmagic stuff, the Blackmagic routers are not as durable as some of the other routers that are available, and so you just want to be very careful of doing that. So anyway, I get multiple colors of cables so that I can keep track of what's going on. I also have these rear twists, and these rear twists come in lots of different colors. I get the resistor range, so I use the resistor color code to put on all of those so that I can tell what they are. I like having different ones because I can tell, like, this is cable, this is for camera 1, this is for camera 2, this is camera 3. All I have to do is look at that cable and I know what camera that's supposed to go to, and I don't have to. There's no randomness to it. So that's what I'd recommend when you're building those things out. They will long runs. Don't use these. In fact, you have to go to a thicker cable between. We'll be safe and say 50 feet to 150 feet. I don't run copper over 150 feet. I know people do. The kind of copper that goes longer than 150 feet or 50 meters is much thicker and much less flexible. Once I hit 150 feet, I move to fiber. So that's and those gets expensive to top it off. But with the 12G, the 6Gs are less expensive. With the 12G SFPs, they are about $500 each way, so about $1,000 a cable, a camera, and that gives you both your control and if you're using Blackmagic. Next question.
Next one comes from Michael Hillman in Sierra Madre, and Michael says, I'm setting up 10 training rooms for a conference that will move from the West Coast to the mid-section of the country to the East Coast over the summer. Each room will need dual wireless lavs. Any recommendations that won't break the bank?
I'm thinking about the bank breaking that is there. I mean, in a training room, almost every wireless mic will work. The biggest thing is that you have to manage the frequencies. So you just have to make sure that that these, especially if you're going to do this regularly, if you're the only one there, then you can start stacking these up. You could probably get away with even like the Sennheiser G1, G2, G3, G4s. I mean, those are not going to those are relatively inexpensive to use. You just have to be very careful of where you're putting the frequencies to make that actually work. But those are, I find going below those, I wouldn't put in the things that are less expensive than that, I probably wouldn't put in a professional setting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you do have a limited budget, I'd look at the DJI. I've ordered a pair, and they still haven't arrived yet. DJI, where are my microphones? Those new digital wireless, they'll accept a plug-in lavalier. They have a built-in microphone that can just be clipped on it like the Rode goes. They automatically detect the environment and choose frequency, so they're frequency hopping, so they can deal with others in the same area and avoid complications with being on the same frequency as others in nearby rooms. And they sound pretty good in the demos that I've seen on YouTube. I haven't had and they also record, so there's an additional feature that you could use so that you can record a lecture on both ends with both microphones in the unit itself, and not having to worry about dropout or interference or anything else like that, destroying your audio, permanent audio record. So I'd look into that, and I think they have a long enough. The one problem with most of those lower-priced battery-powered wireless systems is they have a built-in lithium-ion battery that only lasts for 4 or 5 hours, I think. It depends. And then you have to pop them back in the charger for 30 minutes or so. So if you're going to be using them for long periods of time, that's a consideration. You might have to have several units that you switch between lectures and so on to make sure that you have a sufficient charge, since you can't change out the batteries. They're not removable.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the higher end ones are going to serve you better because you may be the only guy servicing 20-some microphones and wireless lavs. The higher end ones also do frequency search on the spectrum. You may have a problem there and you don't even know it until you've done a search. The Sennheiser, the new 600 series, they also short space the frequencies. You can get better density on the available channels.
Hey, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Courtney, I'm always intrigued by the low end of the spectrum. That DJI mic you mentioned has a really cool feature in that it has a clip, but it also has a magnet on the clip. So you can slip the magnet like inside a shirt and clip the mic to the magnet. I've never seen a mic that does that. It's kind of a cool little feature.
Yeah, you are going to run, if you have 2 mics in every room and there's 10 rooms and they can actually theoretically see each other, that 2.4 gigahertz is going to get really crowded. Just so you know, like that is that's starting, it has, I believe, up to 38 slots. There's up to 38 frequencies inside of the 2.4 that it can use. And so you're using over half of them. And that means that if anything else is using something like that, you're going to start running into things. And so I don't think 2.4 is a valid thing for that much density. I think that I want to order I'm just saying that I like we've had collisions using that. And I would recommend using something that's RF. For
Maybe
that you can
5
manage.
gigahertz. I'm not sure. I'll have to look.
Are they 5? I thought they were 2.4s.
think I'm pretty sure it's 2.4. I would agree. I don't think the DJI is the solution for what Michael is looking for, but it's a neat form factor.
I'll tell you the one that is 2.4 that would let you manage it is, I mean, this may be over your budget and this may break the bank, but the thing that's designed for this is the microflexes. This is the Shure microflex systems. They are designed to do exactly what you're trying to do. They manage the bandwidth carefully. You can lower the quality of the audio and get up to, I think, 54 channels or something like that on the decked, system. And so, and they're Dante and again, you're always weighing time and money and time during the show of making this work. The microflexes, you set them into their little charger and you push the button and it defines all the numbers on the systems. You can have a lav or a podium mic or a handheld, whatever people want to use, but it is expensive. Like it's an expensive solution, but it is, I mean, we used them for a long time and I can hear the difference. Like it's not the same as it's not going to replace a quality audio system, but it's pretty slick. Next question.
Darren McMahon in Leeds in the UK says, hi there. I'd like to use one Stream Deck to control functions on 3 different laptops at the same time. Is network bitfocus companion still the best way to do this? His use case is having 3 mic unmute buttons, 1 for each machine.
Go, Jason.
In my humble opinion, the very best way to do this is with Companion Pi. That way you have Companion, but it's network native, and then in turn can trigger everything else.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jeff Freeland in Indianapolis, Indiana. And Jeff says, I know a few people were going to try Ultimate Ears Fits, F-I-T-S. Maybe it was Alex. Has anyone tried them, and what did they think?
Nigel and I did them together. I don't have it here. It's sitting in the other room. I love them. They were really cool. It was a little like scary that, did I get this right? Because you basically put them in and you hold them, and they heat up. You literally feel them heat up in your ear, and then it uses light to harden them. And now they fit my ears. They fit in my ears way better than the Apple. The AirPod Pros. So I really like them. I don't know if I haven't decided whether the audio quality is better or worse. I think it's actually a little bit better bass response than the AirPod Pros, but they really stick in your ears. Now that they're formed, they just feel like you just pop them in and they're like, and they're really stuck in there. So I'm pretty happy with them, actually. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, comes up next. After watching a number of Apple originals and Apple TV, I'm beginning to wonder if those shows are the highest funded productions in existence. They certainly win for product placement. What do you think?
Let's go pretty quickly on this one. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, they do have a lot of money over at Apple, and as far as product placement goes, I've faced that on other equipment-owned studios as well. If you worked at Sony for years, any movie that you worked on that was at a Sony Pictures production, every single computer monitor was a Sony monitor, and every single TV was a Sony TV. So they do a lot of personal product placement.
Why wouldn't you? You know, like look at that. That's an easy give. So it's yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I've been binge watching We Crashed, which is the Wii work story, and it's just outrageous the amount of money that you can see being used on these productions. But they're going a little too far with the product placement because they're just pushing the Apple product everywhere. Phones, pads, the laptops. They're handing them out. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't mind it. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's quality production if that's what it takes. They've got the money.
Yeah, I will say it's fun to watch Apple product, you know, and Apple shows just because of the level of production quality is so high. It's just outrageous. Like I just was watching Watch the Music or what with I think Mark Ronson. You know it's you know, and it's an Apple thing about, like, I was watching one about drum machines last night. And it's about drum machines, and it's obviously shot. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I'm going to guess those are Angenieux lenses sitting on top of Ariel Fs. You know, like, and they're shooting this stuff, and it just looks so milky and amazing. And I'm just like, they're talking about this geeky little thing, and I was like, I just want everything in the world to be shot like that. You know, would be awesome. So anyway, next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, right back again with this one. Yesterday's YouTube office hours playback sounds a bit distorted. Is there a reason for this?
I don't know. Was it distorted? I didn't. This is a good place where we used to say don't put links in, but if I don't have a link, then I have to go find it during the show. I can't do that. So I don't know what happened there. We'll take a look at it. Thanks for bringing it up. Next question.
Michael Hillman, back from Sierra Madre, California, says, I was at a large finance conference a few weeks ago, and the general session room use, it used to have about 4 to 6 camera operators. I noticed this year that they had PTZ cameras and a single operator. Is this a growing trend?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, absolutely. We carry all the major brands of PTZs, and we're just seeing a huge uptick, mostly in the house of worship and education space, but also for live operations, because we're seeing people that need to fly out to a gig and they're catching COVID or have an exposure and they're not able to go. And people are also seeing just the savings in hotel and cab and flights of having camera operators come out or travel with a gig, and all of a sudden you can get more coverage. And the other thing is now people are coming out with the ePTZ. Like Data Video has a controller that you can just set A and B and just let it pong between the two. So you get a moving camera operation that's, if it's 4K and you're in a 1080 environment, you can easily get a couple scenes out and just jump to each of those scenes. So it's amazing also what Panasonic's doing with the AI. You can auto track a face and you can say, this is Bob, stay on Bob. And if Bob's playing guitar and wandering across the stage, it does a pretty good job even when they turn around. You can get what's called just a wider shot. And so you can have a wide shot that if the person goes out of the frame, the wide shot picks them up for the artificial intelligence. And so it doesn't lose track of that person even when they run across a stage or something. It still knows that's Bob with the blue shirt and the gray hair or whatever. But it's getting very sophisticated. So we're going to see more of it. We're going to see more PTZ cameras get put into productions.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think the obvious other reason why there's more of them being used is crewing issues with the restrictions in travel. And I got to say, Alex, I was talking with a client a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned I was channeling my inner Alex, talking about the carbon footprint of physical events, and like it was like I blew their mind. They had never thought of that, and they're like, "Oh wow, we never thought of that." And I think that there is a slow awakening to some of these advantages. But yeah, the PTZ thing, it's just one less crew person that has to get checked and tested. And yes, the hotels and whatever.
Yeah, we've lost camera operators, at an event. They get there and they get their PCR and nope. And now what are we going to do? And so we try to move to as many PTZs as we can. Go ahead, Bill.
Having done lots and lots of corporate events over the course of my career, the one most controllable cost is your labor cost. Yep. You're going to make plans, years in advance for capital acquisition, but as you get close to anything that involves people, the way to keep your budgets under control is to cut headcount. Just always been that way, always will be, and this does that.
And what we did a lot in Pixelcore. I had, I think, 5 or 6 telemetrics heads, that we used with our Blackmagic cameras and Cabrillo lenses. So they're big honking, $50,000 per head kind of solutions. There are a couple different advantages. We mixed and matched a lot. So there are things like, so you have 7 people up there and they're going to walk on one at a time. You do not want to follow the people walking on with a PTZ. So you have a person shoot that. But once they're all seated at a seat, the PTZ is actually faster than the operator. You just go hit number 1, hit number 2, hit number 3, and the PTZ just goes whoop, 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 and it just has that frame, and you can make fine adjustments. So it's not just the money. It's also that if you mix and match it and you put camera operators where they need to have the control and the PTZs where you need to have precision and speed, you can really create incredible shows, with that. We usually don't try to pan and scan at all with the PTZs, but I will say if you're going to do that, I would hire game players, not camera operators. Folks that are really good at PlayStation turn out to be incredible PTZ operators. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you watched the Google I/O event yesterday, you saw that they had some small robotic heads. For the more intimate shots, they had presenters on either side of the stage that were doing individual pieces with a background piece behind them. And they even had small 12-inch teleprompter on each one, and the camera would pop up in front of that person when they're doing their presentation from the side, and they could read off a teleprompter that was only about 3 or 4 feet from them, or maybe 5 or 6 feet from them. And it didn't block the view of the live audience, and that's another important thing. You can use PTZs without having a cameraman block your view. If you have a live audience viewing the event, they can get in closer, and they can get a more intimate shot, a good wide-angle shot from closer up, which gives you a much more dynamic shot than a long lens from a camera at the back of the studio. And PTZs are getting much better in quality of the cameras and smaller in size, so I think there's going to be a trend.
And again, we use them with big old cameras on them. These telemetrics heads will let us put 30, 40 pounds of camera onto those things. And the other thing we find is that it's more intimate if you have like a round table, or if you have somebody just talking back and forth. You just cut out all those people in the room that are rustling a little bit, that have eye lines. One of the things about, if you want your talent to talk to each other and not look out, you don't want them to see anybody's eyes. And so one of the things we try to do is we try to cover that up so that the operators don't see them, but they don't see people. But the PTZs obviously sort that out as well. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one other thing I forgot to talk about was the BB1, which is this little device that allows you to simply put a VPN together and then have that remote operator control the PTZ from afar. And it's one of those things where you could use that, like you were talking about the gaming controller. So I have this one set up via Vmix, and so I can control a camera down in LA just with my $50 Xbox controller, and it's really smooth once you get it dialed in, and the template's already made in Vmix, so you don't have to program all those buttons. They're already programmed, so it's pretty fascinating, and it's fast. Like, you would think that, oh no, it's going to lag. It's not like controlling a camera here in Zoom, where it's like you push and you wait a second, it moves. It's real time. I mean, it's like a couple milliseconds. It's fast.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm interested in playing with, we were just doing a shoot over the last couple of days, and is using, I'm going to reach out and see if we can start testing black tracks for some of these, so that I have a handful of cameras that you put literally a fob on the person who's up there, and just have 2 or 3 cameras that are always looking at them, just, that are always following them. And I'll still have the same number of camera operators I had before, but I've got some cameras that are just managing that, and they're kind of medium wide shot. So it has room to work, and it just keeps them in the frame. So we're gonna be testing some of that as well. All right, we're gonna go a little over because we don't have a ton of questions for WWDC, and we got a lot of questions here. I purposefully slowed down a little bit today just to see how that felt, and let it just kind of run a little bit, and so to see if it was a more comfortable pace. I don't know if people like it or not. Let us know in the comments. But just make it a little bit more conversational than than the fast and furious that we've had. So just to see what people thought. So anyway, so we're a little behind. We'll run over just a little bit and answer a couple more questions. Go ahead. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York says, any way to use an external cam with an iPhone? Use case the client wants to use a 360 cam with Zoom, but needs to be portable, not laptop.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to say it's crazy that we're calling laptops cumbersome and not portable. That's all.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm going to go with it depends. The Theta Z1 supports RTSP over Ethernet using RTMP via VLC to the cloud. So if you can turn it around from the cloud and then get it into Zoom, have fun.
Yeah, and I don't think that Zoom necessarily it doesn't have any way to represent that yet.
It's going to be a world of hurt.
Well, I know it just doesn't have a way to unwrap that if you send it to them yet. I'm sure that there's somebody back there thinking about it, and it's a very simple math transform, so it wouldn't be that hard to do. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
I'm just trying to figure out the path to put a secondary camera live into your phone as the distribution network.
I wouldn't. They need to get into Zoom. It wouldn't necessarily be the phone. What I would say is that it would be, you'd use something like a Theta, you'd stream it to something else, and then put it into Zoom. I mean,
that's
they're
not how I
asking
read the question. So maybe,
but it's how to do it on the phone. That's the solve that is there. But what the real purpose is to get a 360 cam into Zoom. But there's no way to rotate it around. That's the problem. Unless what you could do is send it out to a 3D viewer, a 360 viewer. So now it's in Zoom, coming from a computer. I know. I get that they have a laptop.
That's why I said VLC. Yeah.
And then you could move it around like this while you're looking at the video. I don't know. It could be useful. Next question.
Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. Any thoughts on the Google keynote yesterday?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, not a lot of thoughts on what was announced, but as far as the presentation itself, here's what the stage looked like, and it was in their live amphitheater that they have there, and you see these little posts with the monitor-mounted cameras on either side. They did live presentations with these little homey backgrounds behind them, and when they go to those presentations, these cameras with the prompters on them would rise up on a pedestal, and they had a camera position with large screen monitors out right where you see the main image from here. That the person would read off of the prompter right under the camera position, so you had much better eye contact with the presenters and the main in-the-field cameras. So I think that presentation looked pretty good, and of course they have that big rounded corner LED screen, which is pretty unusual, and it was very bright, and this is an outdoor, a covered situation, but surrounded by giant outdoors. So it has to be a very bright screen, which it was, and it was not virtual, and there were a lot of real people in the audience. Almost everything they announced was not available yet and won't be available till July or end of the year, which is the new phones and tablets and things like that. So it was kind of interesting, but and that's my comment on the presentation.
Yeah, I'm skipping through it. I think that the biggest challenge here is that using a white background behind people is extremely challenging. So everyone looks underexposed. So every person is looking underexposed because they have a very bright white background behind them. I wouldn't choose that solution. And also, I think that the curved edges. The first thing I did is, as Courtney pointed out, it's like, wow, that was expensive. They had to have those custom made, or somebody just came out with them. I've seen curved edges. We've created curved edges, but you can tell that they're showing off because they put it over top of something to show that we didn't mat it out. We didn't put, something in front of it. Usually when we do curved edges, we build a mat for it, and then we put curtains around it, and we do all the other things to make it look like it has that curved edge. They are purposefully showing off. That is a team that is like, look at what we can do. So I love the stage design. I mean, I think that overall it looks really good. The resolution of the LED wall is not high enough. So I bet you it looks good now on YouTube. I bet you during the live stream it tore up a little bit, and there was some resolution issues because live doesn't handle that very well. And that resolution, that looks like a 2.5 to 3 screen. It doesn't look like what you really want to use is under 1.7 and typically under 1 mil to have that there. But I think, I like Google's kind of wood design look. They've used that for a long time, and it looks very, I think it's very pretty overall as far as how they're doing it. The wide shots look fine. You're not seeing a lot of moire, in that area there. There's a lot of rounded corners. Rounded corners are back in, Definitely, everybody's using them. But if you look at the close-ups, you're going to see underexposed, and you're going to see the texture of the LED wall behind them. That also means that most likely the camera operators had to throw away a lot of shots because of the moire. They're cutting around the moire, but you basically lose, as a TD, you lose maybe 30 to 50% of your shots because what you won't see them do a lot is push in. So watch the keynote and watch how many times you see them push in. They won't do it on an LED wall with that resolution, because if you do a soft push, you'll see the moire appear and disappear as it goes through. Go ahead, Chris.
So a couple things. One, I dare them to change the radius of that curve on that screen. Two, Alex, for you, as much as you love the curved corners, if you had to choose between showing off with curved corners and the dot pitch being above your threshold of acceptability, which would you choose?
Dot pitch in a heartbeat. Dot pitch.
But you love those curved corners.
I love the curved corners, but I would take a 0.9 mil screen and figure out some way to give it a curved corner before I would ever give that up for a curved corner. Yeah, it's 100% Courtney.
What you said about the dot pitch, you can actually kind of see that here, and I think the way they handled it is that they shot their close-ups with the screen behind them on really long lenses.
That exposure is awful.
And especially, like you say, with a dark-skinned person in front of that white screen. And it's a large area. You can't get lights in very close, so you have to have lights fairly far away overhead. And it's an exterior, so balancing light is quite problematic. And there was still a little bit of moire, but they tried to stay away. They tried to keep a solid a white background, but you see moire less on a white background because it blooms a little bit and obliterates some of the moire. But they tried to shoot them on longer lenses and had the people stay at least 10 feet in front of that screen, so it'll be more out of focus.
Every complexion at every shot was underexposed. Like it was a problem all the way across the board for that entire show. So, and I think that it might have been, it looked like a pretty cloudy day too. I think that they might have thought that this was going to work when it was sunny, and then they got a cloudy day and everything, because it looks really soft. And Shoreline is, that's
where they do it at Shoreline Amphitheater?
Yeah, Shoreline. That's definitely Shoreline. Yeah. It's really a good place to do it.
Plenty of backlight.
Sorry?
Plenty of backlight.
Exactly. No, it's Shoreline's actually a pretty good place to shoot. It's they've got a great location for the trucks behind that amphitheater, and then there's a ton of open space which they usually fill with all these tents and everything else, and then just in case you're wondering, streaming is way in the back by the.
As long as the lawn doesn't catch on fire, it's a fine venue.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you heard of what used to happen there?
No.
So it's a landfill. It's all landfill.
Right.
And it was
once it gets burning, it might not stop.
No, but when they first opened it for concerts, people were smoking on the lawn and putting their cigarettes out in the lawn, and there was methane leaks, and the lawn caught fire with an audience in there.
Ooh. it's pretty good. It's pretty good space. Lots of parking. That's always a good thing, because there's a huge field behind it that you can park into. And anyway, there's a lot of things that I don't like about a lot of different things, but the Shoreline's a pretty fun place to do a show. Next question.
Michael Hillman in Sierra Madre, California says, what are the best options for large file sharing? Any opinions on hightail or wetransfer?
We're going to go pretty quick here because I'm going to stop in about 3 minutes to go into WWDC. So go ahead, Grant.
I think it's a polarizing question, because it's like Android versus iPhone. But I've tried OneDrive, was terrible. I didn't like Google Drive locally either. And Dropbox I really like. And I know it's specifically about transferring large files. I've got 9 terabyte on my Dropbox account, and it works beautifully. I use it all over the place, requesting files, requesting large files. It syncs with Vimeo automatically. It tells me when the Vimeo file is there. I do a whole bunch of automation with Dropbox. It just works great.
Go ahead, Chris.
I've mentioned it before recently, but I'm becoming a big fan of Lucid Link.
Bill, real quick.
Great way to share files.
I've heard nothing but good things about Lucid Link, and I'm questionable about. I've been on Frame.io for such a long time, and it is fabulous with their optimizations, but I'm just nervous now that they're a part of Adobe. So I'm looking at Lucid Link more and more.
I mostly use Frame.io for file transfers. What I get with clients is usually Aspera, which is really fast. And those are Aspera is like, starts to get into real industrial grade. And then there's also the Sony Media that we see occasionally, which works really well. It's a really good set of services. I keep on meaning to bring them on. David Brady was talking about them, and I keep on meaning to bring them on. So we'll get them on soon. It's a really good service. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. Any cons to using the Nvidia GPU hack to allow more than 2 or 3 encoders using GTX and RTX versions and don't want to endanger our Vmix machines?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I just wouldn't do it. It's not worth the risk. I mean, you want stability, so I would just not hack anything and just let it fly. And even better yet, I would just use an external hardware encoder like the Epiphan Pearl Nano. You can push 3 or 4 streams out of that thing, and it's rock solid. So I would say either get another computer to do that extra stream, or just get a hardware encoder.
Next question.
Tlaluc Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend, says, why does the gauge of cable affect bandwidth? I've known this for years, but I'm wondering, what's the physics? It's digital, isn't it?
There you go, Jason.
All right, I'm going to try not to step all over this. So in order to get more bandwidth through anything, you end up needing a higher frequency. So as frequencies get higher, the signal travels along the surface of a conductor. So the reduction of the resistance is a function of the circumference of the conductor. That's the most concise I can be.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and it has to do with the width of the dielectric inside. You're dealing with a coaxial cable, so it has a center cable that is surrounded with a dielectric that is then surrounded with a shield on the outside. And the larger the dielectric, the more bandwidth it can carry, and the tighter the shield, the more immune it is to exterior noise. And even though it is a digital signal with ones and zeros, EMI, or electromagnetic interference, and also ringing, which is the length of the cable. Signal goes down the cable, bounces back, down the cable, bounces back. And the longer the cable run, the more ringing and delay causes. So you end up with multiple versions of that little square wave bouncing back and forth within the cable, and that can reduce the sensitivity of the receivers. And so picking those ones and zeros out of all that noise gets more problematic, and you're going to end up with errors which show up as little sparkly things.
And it still comes
video image.
And it still comes back to resistance of the copper over how thick is that, which you would think of the same way. If I'm going to put X number of amps at a certain distance, in power, I'd want to use a thicker cable to lower that resistance on the way through as well. Go ahead, John.
In AC, it's the impedance. So as the waveforms increase, it's the impedance that matters more than resistance.
Mm. Sorry, I misspoke. Thank you. All right. We are now jumping into the second hour, or second 45 minutes. We went a little short. We didn't have a ton of questions at the very top of the hour. For our producers, I make a judgment call. If I've got 7 or 8 questions left at the top of the hour and only 1 for the next hour, and it's not an external guest, I usually will let it roll over a little bit. I always want to try to have people get their questions answered every morning, and as best we can right now. So anyway, that's why we did that. But so we covered Dub last year. I thought it went pretty well, and it really launched what is now Office Hours 2.0. So us, the website was set up in time for it. Just barely, and we had some great guests, and we put together kind of the super sources that are now normal were brand new. And so they worked most of the time. And anyway, we learned a lot and kind of moved it forward, but we're getting ready to do it again, or we're threatening to. And so what we want to do is talk about, what do we want to cover? There's not going to be, there's not a space to cover. There's a keynote in the morning. To be honest with you, I'd rather watch the keynote with all of you on Zoom than watch it in person, even at the theater. So I'll be here with all of you watching it that morning. But I think that, that's one piece of that coverage. And one question I have is, do we want to broadcast that? Do we want to, instead of just have it be an after hours thing, do we want to have our commentary and everything else be something that we make part of the coverage of the thing? And, or do we do something right after it that all those things are up? I'm happy to do it here, because I think most likely, we'll cover it again for Mac Break the next day. Go ahead, Jason.
As the only one of Alex's non-fancy friends who was on that panel last year, I really liked our coverage. But one of the reasons I think it worked really well is we had time to think about it, before, even though it was, pretty soon thereafter, we had a little bit of time to think about it before diving right back into it. And that, at least for me, was really, really helpful. So, yeah.
You're good, Bill.
Analyzing and commenting on the live production aspect of WWDC, I think, is something that really lends itself to real time on the show. Then they're going to announce, we assume they're going to announce a number of new technologies, products, emphasis that Apple's going to be putting on things as they, define their themes. Those things, I do think that it takes some time to digest and think about how they interact with the rest of the production ecosystem out in the world. And so I could see something live where we talk about how the show went, and wow, they've talked about this. In a day or two, let's dive into that and dig more deeply. I think both things are valid.
Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, I was just curious, is office hours just a way for you to get content for MacBreak Weekly? Is that what this is all about?
We're the research department, all right?
It's
that I don't know if it's quickly. I mean, it is every day. I don't know if that's a. Is
that why you started this whole thing? Is just because you were getting lazy and you didn't want to research for MacBreak Weekly anymore?
I don't know if I would say starting office hours would be the lazy way of doing this. So that.
We are all inside the Trojan horse and just don't understand
exactly.
it.
That would be the hardest lazy way to do that. All right, let's jump into the first question.
First question comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Frequency for on-site has been a big part of the conversation. Is this something an IR mic where it could be useful? Never use one myself, but on paper it looks good.
Go ahead, Courtney.
No.
There we go.
I've tried to use IR headphones in the past, and IR microphones will have a similar problem. The problem is line of sight with infrared. You have to maintain line of sight. And if you have someone holding a microphone, the chances that they could cover up the emitter, that's a bigger problem unless they're wearing a hat with a omnidirectional emitter on top of their head and you have multiple receivers around. It's going to be problematic. Plus, in a brightly lit, if you're going to be in the Steve Jobs Theater or anything that's surrounded by windows, brightly lit really reduces the quality of infrared transmission. So it would be highly problematic with infrared. And they control the environment. They can control a lot of the frequencies that are there. So I don't think they're too worried about stepping on other people's frequencies and so on.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, Courtney nailed it. Never, ever, ever, ever use an IR mic, especially outdoors. But even then, just
Go ahead, Bill.
The industry wants to sell things. If IR worked well for microphones, there would be a whole industry of IR microphones. There's not. And the reasons people have talked about it is why that's true.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California. Chris says, have any of the office hours panelists or friends of the panelists applied to attend WWDC in person? Will there be any office hours people inside the mothership?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was invited to apply and I applied. And if I win that lottery, then sure, I'll absolutely go out. But it's going to be a lot of money.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that'll be there, so that'll be in there. We'll see if they want to come out. It's still like a little early for me to get into that big of a crowd. So I think I'm okay. And again, I guess what I will say is that I feel it's a richer experience to be hanging out with everyone here for these keynotes and talking about them here than it is just sitting in there. Because when I'm just watching something nowadays, when I watch anything like this, like a keynote, I'm like, oh, I should have done this in after hours, because I feel like it would have been more fun to talk about it, because I just get bored really quickly. Like, I'm like, okay. So while they're talking about boring things, we can all talk about what we just saw. And we're not just limited to the product releases. We can sit there and talk about the cameras and talk about the animation and talk about all the other things. So I actually would prefer to watch it on Zoom with all of you than be in there in person. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate back of the class experience is what it is, but with a front row when you want to see it.
Yeah.
Because you can sit back here and be snarky. Do we
but you
know?
hate snark.
No, that's not true. But I don't think we want to go into that now. I'll gladly let you know what I hate. We
know.
What are we going to be doing then?
We're trying to, that's what this conversation's about. We're a month out. We're trying to figure that out. So, we can, I think that, what we did last year was the night of the event, we all got to get, we had Justine and Renee and we all talked about what we saw. And then on Thursday, we had more developers. So, and I think that actually worked pretty well, that to have kind of our higher profile folks on the first one and then more of the geeky conversations on the second one. I'm going to be reaching out to more developers to find out what they want. I think that it kind of worked in the sense that we got we really talked more about the products and some of the bigger announcements on the Monday. And then it was either Wednesday or Thursday, we ended up talking more about the, we had more of a discussion about from the coder's perspective, what we saw in more detail, down that road. So.
And do we know what Apple's doing? Are they having like a traditional stage keynote, or are they going to have one of their fancy video keynotes?
I don't know.
It's been announced that it's broadcast.
I mean, if it's the interesting thing is I don't know whether they're going to try to present it. They probably will try to present it on stage, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they present it on a movie and then let everyone go out and look at the new things, or whether they're going to be on stage. I think they're going to try to do it on stage, which is, in my eyes, a little bit of a bummer, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe, hopefully, it's just like, and here's a new movie, and here's another movie. Like, I think that's, where to go. If I
fly out to look at a screen, I will be very upset.
But I guess the thing is that the problem with doing it on the stage, as someone I've streamed a lot of keynotes, I felt like not the last keynote, but the keynote before it with Apple in the fall was peak keynote. Like, it was the best keynote ever released
of all time by
anyone ever. And then the next keynote that Apple did, which obviously looked like it was straddling the fence between stage and I felt like was a huge step down. Like, I felt like during COVID, it was getting better. That team was getting better and better at producing these really high energy, high volume, data and everything else. And then it stepped down. And I have to admit that part of my resistance to going to the theater to watch it is I think it'll be too slow. I'll just be bored. I just think it's going to be like, I don't, I'm just going to be like, oh, okay, this is great. Like, just give me a list of what you released, because I really felt like the one in the fall was like, I was excited to watch it. I was entertained. I was informed, all those things were there. And the next one after that was a huge letdown for me. Like, and I think that I'm not interested in going to see people talk on stage. And even when I looked at pieces of the Google thing, I looked at it a little bit last night. I was like, wow, I hate watching people on stage. I as someone who's done like close to 1,000 of those, I was like, wow, do I hate that? Like, presenting new ideas to me in real time, where I can't go to 1.5x, where I need to, because the density is so low. When you try to say it online, no matter how you rehearse it, you can't reach the information density that you get when you produce it. And I don't need to see that. I don't need it to be live. When I go to a theater, the only reason I would go there is because I want to go out to the little rotunda that's outside of the theater.
The touchy-feely room.
I want to do the touchy. That part I've actually never done. I've never been the right press to go out. Oh no, I did for the Apple Hi-Fi. The Hi-Fi, we did it. Remember that box that they made? The put your thing in. That's the only one I've ever been to that I could.
20 years ago.
There should be a museum of dumb Apple products.
We use that thing.
One of them.
I just want to say that we used that for a decade in our office. Like, that thing, there was a 30-pin iPod that sat in there, and we used that thing for a decade. It's a great little box. Go ahead, Bill.
I think they've announced that they're doing that lottery, and my guess, and this is purely a guess about what we'll see, is the Steve Jobs Theater with a very distributed, spread out audience in there. I know it's going to be relatively young because I think they were looking for the younger developers to get them in, and some people who are doing innovative things, particularly with Swift and those technology things that they're trying to spread across the world, and that a lot of it will be recorded this year as opposed to just staying in the Steve Jobs Theater and having presentation after presentation. That because they've been going in that direction on all their keynotes, more roll-ins. So we'll see. That's my guess.
Yeah, I do think there'll be roll-ins. I think that it'll be very staged. I bet you they'll be shoulder to shoulder because from what I've seen, those seats are pretty big. You're already pretty well spaced out. Those are really, really nice chairs. Go ahead, Sky.
I mean, if I were to win the lottery, yeah, that sounds like a very exciting thing to be inside that spaceship, architecturally, just experientially. So, Alex, because you've done 1,000 of these, the phrase, familiarity breeds contempt. They're not new to you anymore. So, my question, and I set it up for you, is for the masses that don't have your familiarity.
But I guess the thing is that again, as someone watching, would I rather watch someone talking on a stage, or watch something that's highly produced that takes advantage of the visual effects, that takes advantage of all those things? I don't need the artifice of I'm now going to announce it on stage. They still did that with the produced ones. They were just on a stage in San Diego and a stage somewhere else and a stage somewhere else, and so they still did the stagey thing. I really feel like Frame.io did a better job of just building a great keynote. They just didn't do it with as much money. So Frame.io's was creatively more interesting, but at 1/10 the budget.
And you pinged the audience, though. It was creative for creative audience. Are you saying that are you saying the WDC people are wanting to be creative, or they just want the protein only?
Well, I mean, the WDC it's aimed at the developer, but it's still aimed at the public. They're going to be releasing products that the public's going to buy and everything else. And I think, you're going to lean towards talking about some of the new code and the architecture and everything else. But especially with code and architecture where it's interfaces, I just want more animations, and I want more examples, and I want more, of those things. And I don't need, Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, look, I love virtual, obviously, and so I agree. I think that previous keynote was awesome, and it worked really well. But I just have some nostalgia about Jobs doing demos.
But it's Jobs. It's Jobs. It's not.
I totally agree,
keynotes.
And that's what the nostalgia. That's what the nostalgia is. I mean, and there was something compelling about him opening, iPhoto and then saying boom a bunch of times, and but you could just watch that for hours, but it was him.
But he is a unique, it's kind of like Tony Robbins can do a lot of things because he's Tony Robbins, and nobody else can do, you see people try to do Tony Robbins and it falls flat on its face because they're not Tony Robbins. They're not Tony Robbins. They can't be like Tony Robbins. They can't be energy. They can't be 6'7". They can't be, they can't do all the things that Tony Robbins brings to the game. And that's the thing. People say, well, that's the rule. That's how we should do this. And you're like, well, it might, there's certain things that a gymnast can do, one gymnast can do that no one else can do, because of all the things that come together. Go ahead, Chris.
Couple things. One, I know for a fact that they are pre-taping a whole bunch of classes. They've been working on that.
No, all the sessions I think are
all the sessions are pre-taped. I know people that are working on cutting those,
which is great. By the way, I hope they stick with that forever. Watching people who don't go on only go on stage once a year at most, painful. That are coders, was just painful. Oof, all the time. And believe me, I saw a lot of it. And it was just like, ooh, I just don't, no matter how much you practice, you're never going to turn that over. I feel like the pre-produced ones are so much easier to watch than what we had before. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I don't know what production value they're putting into them, but they are pre-taping them, and they're going to be.
I thought last year's looked amazing.
I think
for what they are. I mean, they weren't the same.
This might be a step down below all of that stuff. I don't know. But the other thing about, first of all, I hope that there is a time when there is a human being that can dethrone Steve Jobs as the greatest, keynoter ever. I don't know that we'll ever get that opportunity, but it kind of begs the question: what is a keynote? Define a keynote
anymore. Yeah, it's just people talking.
I mean, it used to be you go up on stage in front of the audience and you know, dog and pony show. But if it's all pre-taped, is it really a keynote?
I agree. I will say something very controversial.
Love these moments. Go ahead.
Mark Benioff is better than Steve Jobs was. Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, he used to be a disaster. Like
he was an awful disaster.
Oh my gosh, his hair was. I did 10 years of streaming of video and streaming for Salesforce, and so I got to watch Mark. And he would come out in the early ones. He'd come out and his suit was disheveled, his hair was everywhere, and he would ramble on stage. And it was. I was like, I don't even know why I'm recording this. Like, no one should see this again, you know. And we had our little EX1s and, you know, like stuff capturing his little keynotes that he was doing. And this was back when they were, you know, a tiny little $500 million company, right? And so, and there was a point where he started doing stuff with Tony Robbins, and his quality changed dramatically. And when he brought it up, he made everybody else bring it up. I find the content of Salesforce keynotes to be very dry. Like, I'm just like, oof, but they do it exceptionally well. Like they put about as much energy as you can put into a CRM, you know, like they're present. I can just tell you I'll give you a little hint that the amount of work that they put into those presentations is astounding, like astounding. And I feel like if Apple did what Salesforce did for their keynotes, wow, and I get that Apple, I'm sure, practices a lot, but like the level of energy that a Salesforce, everyone who's public facing that does these stage things, I mean, they've memorized there's no prompter. They're memorized everything. Like they'll talk for 35 minutes and it's memorized. Like it is, you know, and it's not only been memorized, they've done it so many times. They can emote it. They know exactly where they're going to stand. They know exactly what they're going to do with their hands. They know, you know, like it is, and it's not unnatural. It's got energy. It's amazing to watch. I mean, you should watch a Salesforce keynote to see how it's really done, you know, but know that it is, you know, I can't watch it. I don't know if I can watch them anymore, but the, you know, again, I don't like, and the content is not what I do. So I don't, you know, it's not, but I will say, and I think it's made a huge difference in their market value because people come to Dreamforce and they are inspired, you know, about CRM.
What's interesting about Salesforce is, so I worked with Mark before you did.
Right.
Okay. And when I got hired to direct one of his keynotes, the company that brought me in, they said, so here's the deal. Mark wants to look like Steve Jobs.
Right.
And so, and they literally said that, and that was coming down from Mark's office. And so one, there was the desire to be better. What I wasn't able to communicate was that was going to take a lot of work, and they refused to give me any time with Mark or any rehearsal or even a couple more cameras. And they said, oh no, well, Mark's just going to show up and do it. And that's what he did. And he looked like he did. So first there was at least a desire, but then eventually that turned into drive. And that goes to what you're saying is that they work at it. He worked at it. He, you know, he met with
insane amount of work, you know, and all of these keynotes at that level,
they do their ball thing, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you know, Apple, Google, Facebook, Salesforce, all of those do it's an incredible amount of work. But from the presentation perspective, I've never seen anybody spend as much time on their keynotes as Salesforce. You know, they, you know, on all of the sessions in the main room are insanely rehearsed and planned. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, there is no question that you know, it's not like we're saying there will never be a better public speaker than Steve Jobs, but he did kind of have a presence to him. And, you know, that was very compelling. And he also did stuff that, you know, iPod afterwards was incredibly popular. Now, just to be clear, and getting back to WWDC, the lottery is just for the keynote. And again, there's no question that I would enjoy actually watching it all, with all of you too. And this is not really about comprehension, because every single time you watch a pre-record, the comprehension is going to be better. The keynote is truly just a summary.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Jobs was always a marketing guy, a salesman, so he was excellent at it, of making his point. He was always enthusiastic about everything that he presented. If you could find one pet peeve I have is if you're going to have a keynote presentation and you're going to be presenting it in English, find a native English speaker to present it for you, even if you're the CEO and you're of another nationality and English is not your primary language. I know I've tried to tell.
Fortunately, if we're talking about WWDC, I think we're good.
Yeah, WWDC is probably the only company that doesn't have this problem. But if you look at, I used to teleprompt Nintendo at E3, and trying to make it through the English language teleprompter with the Japanese native speaking people was very difficult.
Sony's CEO is pretty good.
Audience had as much trouble understanding them as I did. Elon Musk is absolutely the worst English-speaking presenter out there, and he doesn't use a teleprompter, prepared speeches, and it's almost incomprehensible.
What's funny about Elon Musk, and I know we're getting a little off, but I really enjoy Elon Musk's keynotes because he gets passionate about it. Like it always starts off badly, and sometimes it's badly somewhere in the middle, but he's passionate about what he's doing. What you get, and I think this is what you got with Steve Jobs that we didn't understand, is Steve Jobs believed in what he was doing. He had a company that only built things that he was interested in. Like literally, this is what Steve thought was the most important thing. This is what, everything about what he was doing was, I'm super excited about this. And it was very easy for him to present because he's the one that identified that as the product. He's the one that worked on the product. He thinks that this is a big deal. And I think that, and his was a little more refined, but I think you feel that with Elon Musk, even though he rambles about. I find myself getting sucked into his keynotes where an engineer's up there and they start talking and they start hacking. He just gets excited and starts talking about, you understand, this is the da-da-da-da-da-da. When he does some kind of setup where he's going to break the window or do something else, that's when things get really ugly and uncomfortable, is anytime he has a presentation point. But when he's just talking, he's really fun to listen to. Go ahead, Sky.
Again, I keep continuing to hear the word passion. And he was also, Steve Jobs was unencumbered with performing for a budget. I mean, for a salary, for a paycheck. He was there because of his passion and said, we're going in this direction because I can afford to. And it wasn't, and that's where a performer is beholding to a paycheck, a manager, his next job, where the honing of a presentation skill was so that he could go further, faster with more people.
Yeah. All right. We'll go back to how we're going to cover this. Next question.
Next one comes to us from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. John says, will office hours be dedicated to the WWDC keynote, or will they be session coverage? I know, how will we manage covering multiple sessions that end at the same time?
I think they're all coming out at the same time, or they're coming out in days. They're all, the rumor is they're all pre-recorded. So I don't think we're going to have to, I think the keynote, and then there's potentially another stream. I think there's another stream that happens in the afternoon. Those are the only ones live. We may cover both of those. There's the keynote, and then there's State of the Union, which happens in the afternoon. So that may be another one. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, also, there are so many sessions that it's impossible to cover all of them across the same time period. But I do think it would be interesting, since the agenda for each of the days, and I think there's 3 or 4 days of presentations, it'd be interesting to set up something where people can vote on whether they're interested in particular topics, and maybe we could discuss.
I don't think this. I think those are the only 2 live things that are happening, though.
I'm just saying when the whole thing goes up, all those sessions in the back go up online during WWDC. Mm-hmm. So as they go up and people in our audience, all of our producers and everybody else could see those, if there are particular topics, we could watch and or discuss something like that in the days following. That's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is something that we could, like we did with NAB. Sorry, I'm thinking about something now.
There's an incredible amount of richness in those presentations. I learned from watching a lot of them last year so many things about many topics.
What if we did like extended office hours? Like there could be an evening event that we have that's bigger, but an extended office hours where we try to grab experts that are from some of those things. Like if they talk about AR, we try to grab a couple AR folks and do a second hour or whatever, and with them just to talk about that subject, and then someone who's going to talk about whatever the releases are. Let's say AR.
I mean, that's possible. I think the Apple even might be okay with us grabbing a little piece and discussing a topic inside a presentation.
No.
We'll be fine with it. So the main thing though is we don't have to grab a piece of it. We just grab the people who would know about it. So what we have to do is identify, and they can just discuss it. So I don't think that'd be a problem. I think that like a bunch of little things during the day and then still something in the evening, but rather than having what I like about that is rather than having, we may still do the same two, like a one with whatever high profile folks are willing to jump on with us, and then another one where we have kind of a roundtable of general discussion about coding. But I think in the mornings there we could have these second hours that are about different subjects within that. Could be really interesting. All right, people have to let me know what they think. Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't attended any of these since they've been hybrid or virtual. In the sessions, since you say the sessions are all going to be pre-recorded, do they ever handle audience QA at the end of the session? And how do they handle that if it's a virtual when the person's on videotape? Or
they don't have audience QA when it was in person.
They didn't either.
No. Yeah, it's not a thing they do. Go ahead, Jason.
Alex, I think your idea is.
By the way, before Jason, they do audio. They do the developer series that happened in the fall, which I thought was great. I thought what was great about the developer series in the fall was that nothing was overlapped. They did a short presentation and then they opened it up for questions. The only weak point was really the WebEx part of it, but the content of that was stellar because you were able to ask questions and you were able to be part of that conversation.
I thought that's what the presentations were like at WWDC. I haven't attended it, but so they're not interactive.
No, so WWDC they have the presentations, and then they have these whiteboard sessions where you can go down and there's engineering down there, like the maps team is down and somewhere, and they've got a big whiteboard, and you can sit there and just ask them questions, and they'll sit there and talk to you about it, and people can kind of crowd around and watch. And so and then they have individual one-on-one sessions. And I think that they may, we'll see what they do this year for DubDub, but so I think that's you can ask them questions and have conversation, but it's not during not in front of all those audience, because the problem is you always get some malcontent who wants to ask you some hard question that you can't fix in front of 300 people. And it's just it's just hard to keep the messaging forward. Like you can have that conversation with Apple about it. But there's always somebody who wants to complain about it in front of 300 people. And it's something that, they rarely, the biggest problem, the hardest problem with a lot of technical folks, and especially programmers, can be that the dynamic range of their emotional dynamic range can, not be as broad. And so they can, they get hooked on something and they've got something they want to chew on in front of everybody, and they don't realize that that's really not the place to do that. And they can't, Jason.
Yeah. If last year was any indication of this year, the Q&A happens as part of the coding lab, which is, usually sometime during the same day as the particular session. The sessions are stagnated. And, they do go actually out at a specific time, so you could actually watch it live. But Alex, I love your idea of trying to get people who really understand this, because they're so bespoke. Like, if you don't, you could be an amazing coder and, never deal with core data, which, something I had to learn, and it was really, really hard. And you can't just speak about it in general terms. It doesn't work.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I will say there are some sessions that are generic enough so that, they talk about areas of interest inside the developer community. But there are also things that are so dense. Let's look deep into the code of how you program this, particularly if there's a new capability in the processors or in something but I think that developed.
I think like what's new in HLS is a typical one that happens every year. The new AR stuff will be something that's interesting, of course. The new hardware,
functional design, that's a great lecture.
Yeah, so a lot of those get updated, and they'd be a little bit more general purpose.
I'm agreeing with that. Yes, there are some topics that would lend themselves to post discussion, and some that my eye glazed over a lot watching a few of them as I sampled them last year because it was like strings of code for hours.
Right. Next question.
Next question comes up with J.J. McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. Says, would it be possible to schedule particular professionals to be acutely snarky about the featured subject, assuming a schedule events from Apple?
We have Chris. We have all the snark we need. Next question.
I was going to sign a snark captain for each of you.
Yeah.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, to do a Mystery Science Theater 3 case style takeover of how much lower would you want the feed? How much lower would you want the feed to be that way when it's quiet? You can hear clearly. So it's an audio split question. So you can hear but easily talk over the presentation.
What we have found is the way to do this is to use it as a share screen, computer audio, like that's how we got the audio in, I think, for the last one. And I think that it worked relatively well. And I think we just kind of tuned it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I would love to see it. Unfortunately, a lot of people listen on portable devices, so that this may rule out that. I'd love to see it us mix the audio so that the presentation is in one channel and our commentary is in the other, so that people could adjust their own level. And if they wanted to tune the commentary to a lower level, they could by just adjusting the balance. That would be a cool way to do it, but not everybody could accommodate that type of setup.
We could, for the HDR feed of it, we could put us in the surround.
Ooh, that would be snark
We
heaven.
are so going to do that.
Count me in.
Boom. So you just hear us talking beside you and around you, and then you just walk. That way you could hear both of them. I can tell you that sounds confusing, but it'll actually work really well. We'll test it. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I would like to put Alex in the right ear, me in the left ear, and everybody else around.
So I'm gonna put Chris in the left ear, and then I'm gonna whisper. I'm gonna whisper in the right ear all the time, like, this feature should have been added 2 years ago. Anyway, so all right.
Can we add little devil and angel avatars to sit on the shoulder?
Yeah, an Android and an iOS person. Just hear them talking back and forth. That's been an Android for the last 5 years. All right, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, how does the 3 people talking limit in Zoom affect the planning for this kind of live feed review?
We've done it in after hours, so it hasn't been, it's worked pretty well. I don't think we're all talking at the same time. The big thing we learned was you had to use the computer audio input. That's the what really fixed things, is because we don't want that to duck out. And so computer audio input in the screen share definitely fixes and we'll test it between now and then so that we really get it working if we're going to extend out. I also think that if it's at 10 o'clock, I don't know when. Is the keynote at 10? I think they put out things. I don't know when the keynote is. It usually is. If it's at 10, I think what we should do is just finish our second hour or whatever, just keep going, and just talk about what we think is going to happen. We'll probably end up talking 2 hours about that, and then we'll just go right into it. It'll be a long morning. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael again. If they're running the event in the Steve Jobs Theater, won't they have challenges reactivating all the various systems and maintaining them? That is, software updates after 2 years of dormancy. Where will they find crew?
Go, Jason.
Rarely do I get to use superlatives like this, but Apple has all the crew they need.
And I don't think that the theater has been as that dormant. I doubt that there have been people at all of these facilities working and keeping things going and everything else. I don't think that's going to change that much. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, is up next. He says, which exact day are we planning for out of June 6th through 10th?
I'm thinking of touching on it almost every day to some degree, but I think I'm trying to coordinate the first session with, Renee wasn't sure exactly when, what his schedule looked like yet. And I'm going to reach out to Justine and other folks, see who's available. It all depends on who's coming up. What's new this year is that people are actually coming to the event. So I'm trying to figure out what fits into everybody's schedule. And if it does, we may have a different set of people, experts, doing that. But yeah, so I there's definitely something Monday or Tuesday. And then I think most likely, I think that we might do it on the 10th, the Friday, as the other as like the wrap up. We did it, I think, Wednesday or Thursday of last year, and I'd like a little bit more time. So we really have thought about it and looked at it, and I think that we may discuss it. Now, what we have to time is before that we have NAMM, and then we have to figure out what days we want to cover Cinegear. But isn't Cinegear going into the weekend? Doesn't Cinegear go into that weekend?
It is. So that's the rub, is that Cinegear's the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So there's some overlap there, and then Infocom's the day before. So there's a lot going on. Yeah,
so I think that the Infocom thing, I'm not covering that. I mean, if there's people willing to do it, I'm happy to do a second hour or an hour from the space. I just can't process Infocom. I can't process another event in that week. So that's definitely one. If people want to take it on, go for it. I'm not going to try to resource it, in the same way that I'm going to try to this week. Now that we started talking about these, I'm going to go out and try to resource, NAMM and Cinegear, just to make sure we have what we need for those. We'll talk about that next week and make sure we get what we need. I think that we should do Cinegear longer, potentially on that Saturday. Just let it go out, and we'll figure out, like, we'll still do our education stuff, and then we'll come into it, and from 10 o'clock on, we just do it until we get tired. We just decide we can't go any further. There's no hard end. It just depends on the teams. But that gives you a couple days within Cinegear to build the packages, do the, I'm highly resistant to doing things on Sunday. So I'm just, so other than office hours in the morning, anytime I add anything after 9 a.m., I find myself
the challenge
beaten.
On Saturday, or the challenge at the NAB experience was our boots on the ground. As they were volunteers, they only had so much limited time space, and
we'll have to decide. That's what we have to figure out.
But I'm just saying, as a condition, if you have boots on the ground, that's a limitation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we
can, a value at the same time. Yeah.
Again, we can talk about it and figure out if we only have an hour or two of people, we only have an hour or two of people. That's how long it'll last. So the real, So anyway, so I think that we have. And when does NAMM start and end? What is the
9 through 12? I think.
No, it's not at the same time. It's the weekend before, I think.
I was thinking of Cinegear.
Yeah, no, that is. But I think that we can package these in. Yeah, it's Friday through. It's the weekend before. So I think that NAMM would most likely be June 4th. The Saturday would do the same thing that we do for Cinegear, depending on who's available. So it'd be that Saturday we do NAMM, and then the next Saturday we do Cinegear, and in the week in between we do a lot of a dub.
See, I think since Guy didn't make it to NAB, he should be the boots on the ground to all of these events. I think we should just ping pong him.
We'll raise some money and we'll just have Guy. We'll get Guy a private jet. I think that's what we do, and we just have him
jet
put the G5 down.
That'd be cool. I'm already going to be at Infocom, it looks like, unless I.
Oh, well, maybe you and Jeffrey. I think Jeffrey's going to be at Infocom. I'm going to be at Infocom virtually. I am speaking there. I'm just not going. So I think I'm one of the only people coming virtually. I think they really wanted everybody in person, but we're talking about virtual events. So it seemed apropos. So anyway, yeah. So let's Guy, if you're going to be there, and we know Jeffrey's going to be there, we can see if there's anybody else in Vegas.
Jeffrey has this harebrained idea about driving from Vegas, from Infocom to Cinegear. I don't know if I could handle that with Jeffrey. So we'll see. Trap me in a car with Jeffrey for 6 hours. We'll see.
Get you a minivan.
We don't kill each other by the time we get there.
What does it take? It's 2.5 hours, isn't it?
Is it 2.5 hours?
I've done that driving
a while.
Well, if you
Okay, because we stopped along the way.
80 miles an hour on 15, which you can. You
2.5 hours to get outside of Los Angeles, then 2.5 hours to get through Los Angeles.
It's 80 in the slow lane. So anyway, I think I did it. I had to get to something in LA, and I did. It was late night, and I did get from Vegas to LA in 2.5 hours.
I will say, Chris Fenwick's truck is fast. It's very fast.
All right. Next question.
And unreasonably fast. Douglas Carmichael has a next. No, I'm sorry. Peter Marr in Auckland, New Zealand has a next question. Given Courtney's suggestion, could you not use 5.1 or HDR for an audio commentary channel, or did you just answer that live while I was in another room?
We did. We're gonna do our commentary in in a 5.1 experience, we're gonna test it, start testing it next week. So in a 5.1 experience, we'll put the group, all of us, in the surrounds. I think that'll be really fun. So we'll start working on that. You'll hear us playing with it. It'll probably be a disaster at first, but I think it could be really cool.
Isn't it harder to control the level of the surrounds than it is left right? For most people.
We're gonna figure it out. No one's ever done it before.
We're not going to hear each other in 5.1, but we'll be broadcast to the audience in 5.1. Right.
And if you watch the regular SDR, it'll just be in stereo. It'll just be the HDR stream and it'll only work, I think, on your TV. So you have to turn your TV on to get it. I don't think you'll hear it anywhere else. All right, let's go to the last comment question of the morning.
Douglas Carmichael gets the honors. How specifically would they route the video sources to the projection and or audio system? Would there be a universe-like touchscreen on an iPad or manually via Video Hub, ATEM, or similar device?
I don't have a reference point for that. Like, I don't know exactly what we're routing.
Is he talking about the playback inside the WWDC itself for the keynotes or something? Because they would have any switcher combination they could possibly want with the amount of money they have.
I think most of the keynotes have broadcast trucks, so they'll have 2 or 3 broadcast trucks parked, somewhere nearby, and it's a big old, 2 double expando 54 foots. I think are the ones that typically come in. Most of the ones we see at these conferences are I can't remember now. One of the NAP ones. So anyway, so that's what I think we'll probably see there is what's running the screen. This is the first conversation. We are going to be talking about these each week. This is going to be like a little bit of the next couple of weeks we're going to be talking about. So think about these things. Think about what make them good. I think that there's a real opportunity here for us to do something pretty special, and I want to make sure that we spend enough time talking about it. The emails that go out have links if you are interested in being an off-site producer, being on the ground. It is the best way to get to know people. Like, this is it. I mean, doing Office Hours 2.0 is a good way to do it. Working on these is an incredible way to meet other people, figure out who you like to work with, who you like to do things with. So, I'd highly recommend it if you have any interest in time that you look at how you might be able to contribute to these. It also really, makes a difference for what we're doing in the sense that, we're really providing a service to the whole industry. There's a lot of people who aren't going to go, who can't go. And if we do, the better we get at this, and, we won't do it perfectly. We'll do it better than the last one. That's all we have to do, is just better than the last one is the goal. And as we do these and as we get them good, I think that we'll end up with, there's a potential, I think, a year from now, that there's more people watching our coverage of this than there are at the event. And that's not a bad thing for the event. Like, that is having lots of, it means, because what it means is that even if you had less, for someone who goes to NAB or goes to, I've been really thinking about this, that goes to Infocom or whatever, the opportunity to have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people watching and having us roam around. We can't go to you. We can't go to so that booth becomes more and more important actually for you, because there's, we're really covering it. And, we haven't seen that kind of coverage from anybody else. It's always over packaged. It's always, under informationed. We're providing a geeky, really dig into it kind of coverage, which I just haven't, seen very much of. Usually get caught up in the logistics. And so I think that we could be onto something that's pretty cool. So I'd highly recommend jumping onto these teams, and you have a link again we send out. All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes making the show work. If you're interested in doing that, check it out in Discord. I'll put that, if someone sends me the link, someone Discords me the link, I'll put that into the email as well, so people can see it as well. Just another place for people to sign up. But we'd love to have you there. And it's just incredible. There's a whole team that comes together and puts this together every single day. And you'll see them in the credits here in a second. Thanks to the producers, good questions every single time. I hope you liked. Let me know. You can ping me directly on Discord or whatever. Let me know if you like. I slowed the pace down a little bit and just let us kind of chew on things a little bit more. Rather than pushing it, it's an experiment. So let me know what you all think of that. And then thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. It's always good to see everybody here. So still enjoying it after 700 and I don't know how many. So it's a lot of fun. All right. Now we're going to jump into after hours.
I think the other day was 777. So we're beyond. Wow. I know. We're a giant airplane.
This is the only show that gives away backstage passes for free.
That's why it's called giveaway.
Yeah, we call it giveaway. What's called giveaway? I don't understand. Look at all these people.
To drive to Vegas. I thought it was 4 hours.
I think
It's faster car.
it's the better. Yeah, Ferrari.
Gasoline.
Ferrari. Rent a Ferrari.
Not a Yugo. Red Yugo. Go fast.